and earned himself a brief stop and go very early in the race. But that car came back from what was then 12th place in a packed field, of course. You know, if you get a penalty early, then you go behind a lot of cars by the time you've done a drive-through. 4th place, Two Seas Motorsport, and that car's still very much in contention. That's the Bahrain entered car. In 5th place, the first of the Veloce eSports cars, that's car number 24. In 6th position, the 3rd of 4 Rebellion Williams eSports cars, that's car number 3, as you mentioned, Jack Keithley, with that little incident, or that slightly more than little incident early on, or just 15 minutes ago. He's now back up to 6th ahead of car number 7, the Panis Racing AAA machine, and that being driven by rear-wheel driver Tristan Vautier. In 8th place, car number 46, that's entered by TDSE Racing Motul, and Gerda van der Gaard, the normal Racing Team Netherlands driver, is in that car, and that is the one that we are watching at the moment. Of course, TDS Racing, with so much success recently in LMP2 at Le Mans as well, their engineers really know how to win this race. In 9th place, this is the car we're looking at now. This is E-Team WRT. Team WRT, super successful in GT racing, have also in the last couple of seasons gone into DTM as an Audi customer team. They've been very successful with Audi cars for a number of years. Vincent Vos, former racer, is the manager of that team and really knows how to put a program together. But this is, as I understand, my grey cells recall, their first ever Le Mans. And in 10th place, we're looking at him now. This is Jenson Button's own team, Team Rocket Zanshow. And again, for those of you who haven't caught up with the news because you've been too busy watching the race, Jenson Button and his wife announced yesterday, in fact, after his first stints in the car at the virtual Le Mans 24 Hours, that their son Hendrix will be joined in the not enormously distant future by a little baby sister. So congratulations to them. Congratulations also to Jenson on having become a very fine sim racer in isolation. And he is driving from his home on the west coast of the USA. Just outside the top 10, the better of the 2 Toyota Gazoo racing entries that remain in the race. The regular number 7 and number 8 cars that we see in World Endurance, they were joined by a number 10 car from Toyota Gazoo Racing Argentina. That one is out of the race, but Mike Conway is 11th. Gabriel Aubrey is 12th for Jota Team Redline, the 37 Jota Sport car. And unfortunately for Jota, don't seem to be having much of a rub of the green with their 2 cars. 37 and 38 have both crept up the order and both been pushed back down. They found more snakes than ladders. IDEC Sport, driver change has just happened. Michi Hoyer has taken over, and as I was talking about Gabriel Aubrey in the studio, IDEC Sports driver stood up out of the rig, rather stiff-legged, I have to say, and wandered away. That was Paul-Luc Chatin. And Paul-Luc will be heading back to the hotel, just a few minutes walk away to have a bit of a wash and some shut-eye, I think. Michi Hoyer, their sim racing expert, who only came on board the program a week or so ago. Now, he may well need some sleep by Monday evening, because he has been doing everything everywhere, almost every conceivable hour of the night and day, Lewis, testing and testing and testing various different options on the car to try and get them up to speed.
Yeah, so. Not only that, he's been racing elsewhere in sim racing as well. He's been a busy boy. Also, he did a 24-hour race last week. At the weekend, so doing those back-to-back with all of the testing for this as well. Michi Hoyer is a real story for sim racing at the moment. For those of you that don't really know too much about sim racing, Michi Hoyer, let's say 12 months ago, maybe even slightly longer than that, definitely not a driver that you would consider to be towards the front of many fields of particular strength. However, particularly I would say definitely the last 6 months, Michi Hoyer has gone through some major changes in his ability in sim racing, having started the Formula Sim Racing World Championship in this new decade, taking victory in the first round of the season against, with a wheel-to-wheel battle that, by the way, was incredible, with Jerne Simoncic, who is on the grid and the pole sitter in LMP. Incredible stuff. He's done that. He's won the official rFactor 2 GT Challenge Championship as well for his team, the team that he takes part in Burst Esports. A real resurgence, and obviously we see this in motorsport as well. These are things that we get in sim racing. You do see drivers that come and go, and it's not just that's not a motorsport thing. That's
a sport thing. You know, the talent is always there, but sometimes the form drops a bit, you know, and you see that in any sport that you follow, any sport you care to mention. Some of the superstars have slumps. And it's not through lack of practice or lack of talent or lack of anything else, it's just the form goes. Looking here at the 50 car, this is entered by Richard Mille, one of the strong supporters of the FIA WEC, and Richard Mille himself on the FIA's sports car racing body. That's been driven by Tatiana Calderon. She brings the car into the pit lane, and this is the all-female crew in the race. So Tatiana from Colombia, joined by Catherine Legg, Germany's Sophia Flörsch, and Australia's Emily Jones. And of those, it is Emily Jones who is the gaming expert, who has been leading the development of the car. And by her own admission, we chatted to her online yesterday after an accident. Catherine Legg was sitting at her rig. She said, state of the art in the 1980s. Yeah. It did a little bit look like she was in sort of a classic car, very slightly, but yeah, she's definitely not quite feeling that she's up to speed with some of the front runners who have been doing an awful lot of sim racing.
Yeah, to be fair, like her wheel and stuff, it's okay. The screen looked fine. So it was a wide screen. It's 21:9 if you want to know the aspect ratio. And so it would stretch out to the whole screen. It gives you just a little bit more peripheral vision. The Logitech G29 is a gear-driven wheel, which means the force feedback from it, what the game is basically telling the wheel to vibrate or move around as, can feel a little bit clunky. Can feel a little bit like almost your hands are being hit by a hammer. It's only 2 Newton meters of torque as well, which for reference is not much. And then you've got some that are belt driven, which gives a smoother force feedback, but then you lose some of the detail. And you've got direct drive wheels, which are the big detail, but they're very expensive. Yep. So I don't blame, you know, a G27 is a fine wheel. I have one, probably one of the most common sim racing wheels you'll have. The practice is the big thing there.
Again, as with every sport, so with motor racing, the more hours you do it, you know, 1,000 repetitions. Who came up with that as being the ideal for mastering anything? Well, that's very much the case. And for those who are new to this, and Mike Conway in the Toyota Gazoo racing team would definitely be one of those as well, then it is time on track, it is time at the wheel that is going to pay off. About half of our 30-car LMP2 field has just completed or have just completed their pit stops, including a number of our top 10 cars like the Team WRT car. Looking here at 42, this is the cool racing entry of Nico Lapierre, former factory Toyota driver, multiple Le Mans class winner, and very, very emotional finish when he brought the car to the line for Cinetec Alpine Elf to win LMP2 in his most recent outing at Le Mans. I'm afraid that's not going to be replicated here. Cool racing down in 22nd position, so off page 1 of your timing pylon, and getting a lot of curb and a lot of air in the first part of the forward chicane. Cars tend not to land 4 square, and so again he feels that with the wheel writhing in his hands. He goes on to start lap number 264 of their race, and that compares with the leader, who is on lap number 272. So, as I said earlier, just 29 minutes of enforced stoppage in the race so far, and we have just under 7 hours to go. This is where a lot of fans will be groggily dragging themselves out of their tents, brushing their teeth with leftover beer or red wine, getting the barbecue fired up for breakfast with whatever they've got left, and often tuning into Radio Le Mans to figure out exactly what did happen while they were passed out in the middle of the French countryside somewhere. And it's always a good opportunity as you get towards breakfast time to catch up with life. Now, our friends in the dungeon, or the bowels of the basement here in Studio Gabriel in Paris, where we are running the race from at Motorsport Games, are running through the whole field. We've now run through pretty much the entire LMP field, and this is our race leader in GTE, Nick Tandy, out front in the 63 Porsche. Porsche had a very tight hold on qualifying. 4 of the top 5 cars were from the Porsche eSports team and Dempsey Proton, who got right in amongst the chickens, didn't they? They were in the middle of the hen house on the outside the front row of the grid, and right from the very start of the race, Dempsey Proton and the Porsche eSport team were in a very intense battle. Dempsey Proton hit problems, so unfortunately, not long after we saw team boss Patrick Dempsey and heard from him on air, the team started to struggle a little bit, and they're still not out of the running. Nobody is on the lead lap apart from the top 3 cars in GTE. They are off the lead lap, but doesn't take an awful lot, as we've seen in the last hour, for cars to lose a lap. Here is the car that's in second place, and the thundering of the GM V8 under the hood of the Corvette for R8G eSports team. You've got a prototype right in front of it with that Gibson V8 wailing away, and you can still only hear the bellow of the Corvette. So much of this is utter realism as well, isn't it? And their superstar, just a little bit about the history of their superstar driver who's at the wheel at the moment, one of their sim racing pros.
Haniovski, a Macedonian, one of the only Macedonians in sim racing, has risen to form, particularly on R Factor 2, but has more recently started expanding himself outside of that, has qualified. One of 20 drivers qualified for the ADAC GT Masters Esports Championship alongside his teammate in that car, Risto Capit, whilst they're driving for AAA. Adam Pinches, another driver on the grid, has joined him in that, another AAA driver. With him in that, of course, Erhan Yovski and Risto Capit driving for R8G Esports. I believe there is some kind of technical agreement there between AAA and R8G. But I'm not 100% on that one.
and probably they're not telling either.
No. Yeah. It's all very confusing on that side. But Yovski, me and Chris made a list of the top drivers in sim racing that are taking part in this event, particularly on the R Factor 2 side of things. And Erhan Yovski is very much on that list. He is like on R Factor 2. If you put him in equal machinery, equal setup, equal everything, like, you'll see him in the top 3. He is a very, very fast driver, and very calm as well. He's not one of these drivers that's aggressive through traffic. He knows what he's doing. He knows how to get through traffic quickly without taking any real major risk, and that's why he kind of moves his way towards the front without really dropping off at any point.
And that has been certainly vouchsafed by the fact that that Corvette is in second place. The only incident that I've seen them have was when Catherine Legg spun in the chicane and rejoined in what she thought was a gap in traffic. It wasn't a big enough gap in traffic to insert an LMP2 car for sure, and her periphery was hidden, the R8G car. It didn't take a big hit, or it took a big hit, but it didn't get a lot of damage, clearly, and it didn't have a lot of delay. They are in second place. Third place, Mac Backham. That's the Porsche eSport team. Porsche had 4 dogs in the hunt, and their 92 car is in third place overall. So at the moment, Porsche still have 2 cars potentially on the podium. Fourth place, again, creeping right back up the order. with their Italian driver Bianca Lilla at the wheel is the 95 Aston Martin. So Aston Martin racing with their 95 car, creeping back into it gradually. There it is with the safest banner across the top. Our title sponsor of the 24-hour Le Mans Virtual, Safest from Saudi Arabia, representing 6 million gamers in Saudi Arabia. Kingdom opening up its sporting doors a little further after having the Formula E races there, after the Dakar being based there as well. And that Aston Martin is up in 4th place. In 5th position, the Dempsey Proton car again on the recovery drive, just under 3 minutes behind the Aston. And the familiar World War I battleship disruptive pattern, which is always what I think of on the Dempsey Proton cars. They're very regular visitors to Le Mans, to the 24 hours, and again, regular racers in the World Endurance Championship. Very experienced team. Patrick Dempsey, of course, has raced here and has, as a team owner, been on the podium in the GT Am class, courtesy of his team. And watching from the sidelines from his home in Malibu yesterday, it was clear that, given a bit of time and a following wind, he would like to have been in this race as well, possibly in another car. It is Ricardo Parra at the wheel, one of their real-world racing drivers at the moment in 5th position. And again, the gap ahead of them is just under 3 minutes. At the moment, 2 minutes 54 to the 95 Aston Martin. And can't be much more than about half a lap back to the car in 6th position, which is the 64 Corvette. There it is. In fact, that's not half a lap back. Now, which of those two is the 64 Corvette? They're running nose to tail. 63 is just ahead. That's Nicky Katzberg, but he's behind on the road. 63 car is in 10th place. 64 Corvette running line astern. That car is our 6th position car.
It's great for photographs, though, isn't it? Your Corvette, you're thinking, oh, we could get some good ones here.
yeah, beautiful scenery, a legendary location, or a famed location at least. Won't upset Tim Gray any further with calling Le Mans legendary. Legends are made from real stuff, sort of, sometimes. According to the dictionary definition of mythical and legendary, Le Mans is neither, because it actually does exist and it is real. And it is very real for some of these drivers right now as well, isn't it?
Very much so. We're, I think we're on board there with Alan Terzic, who's sharing the car with Dennis Lind, with Jan Magnussen as well. Who's the other driver?
Tom Milner, yeah. Tom Milner is the only American there. Jan Magnussen has spent so much time racing in the States that I'm sure he's pretty much as naturalised an American as it gets. And Dennis Lind, the Dane, single-seater racer, became a Porsche driver briefly, and now a newcomer to the Corvette team, as in the other car is Nicky Katzberg, who's driving that, and he was a BMW M8 driver up until the end of their program last season, at last Le Mans, in fact, at the end of the super season of the World Endurance Championship. And BMW then pulled the plug on that. He's racing again for Hyundai in WTCR, the World Touring Cars, and racing for the Corvette factory team. And that must be a very different oral experience from a 2-litre turbocharged front-wheel drive touring car to have that 7-litre bow tie engine roaring away in front of you, and the heating pipes down the side. It must be like driving a furnace, I always think, particularly on a hot day, because all the heat from the exhaust runs under the driver's feet and out along the side of the car. It is a very, very hot environment.
It's toasty indeed.
Yeah, very toasty is right.
I will say something, by the way. Dennis Lind, I am assuming you're watching from home right now. And I've been saying...
Are you going to roast him, are you?
No,
is he going under a bus?
He is not, but I have been waiting for a T-shirt from Dennis Lind for nearly 9 months now, and I still don't have it, because this is a thing that a lot of you might not know about sim races. We saw it with Roy McDuff when he was driving earlier, as well as a few of the other drivers. A lot of the sim teams have their own T-shirt, they're branded T-shirts. Now, he technically runs 2 teams in sim racing. He runs Singularity and then the Toro Rosso AlphaTauri of that team being a team called Hydra Esport, and they have some fantastic looking t-shirts, and I have been telling Dennis for months, I want one, send me a t-shirt, and he told me a few months ago, he was like, oh yeah, I'm going to send you one, I'm even going to send you a Singularity t-shirt. Hasn't asked for my address though. Where's he posting that?
Well, they are nice t-shirts. It fits quite well.
Yeah.
Yes, it's like winning Popmaster and waiting for Ken Bruce's digital radio to come through, isn't it, possibly? Good morning to Baron von Clutch, Peter Leung, who is watching from the west coast of Canada. I'm doing well. I've had very nearly 3 hours sleep and a mug of tea. So the good Baron, I hope you're doing well as well. And whoever has camped out in their garden overnight, I hope you haven't kept the neighbours awake too long in your simul Le Mans situation, and I hope the day is going well. Well, the day is going well so far for most of our racers, whether they are up or down in the order. A lot of them having a very long and consistent run at the moment. And looking a little further down our GT field, let me find my timing screen again.
This is the time when mistakes can really creep in, and they do genuinely come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
You'll be driving, you'll be doing your own thing, and then suddenly you're backwards and in a barrier before you can think, what's happened there, because of fatigue, because of tiredness. When I've brought this up before, where you can have a car on the edge for the first couple of hours of the race, because the thing is, if it's sliding through the Porsche curves, when you're awake, you can catch that. You've got the ability to catch that car because you're awake, you're there. And the later it gets, the more tired it gets, the later your reaction to that becomes. Thus, you can't catch those slides, those mistakes. And the thing is, like, when you're pushing that hard, you have the setup the way it is.
Yep.
Sometimes it's very, very easy to get out of the rhythm and just overcorrect, not even correct at all.
Exactly right, and you know, in the real world, exactly the same as well. And that's why I was wondering whether the longer the race goes on and the more the fatigue sets in, the discipline of the pro drivers to get themselves away from the rig, to do their hydration, to eat the food they're supposed to get the rest they're supposed to, whether that is going to keep them sharper in the frame. Battle of two Corvettes here. We just saw the black and white feed racing car, number 99. Theo Porcher is driving that, and he's being chased down by Nicky Katzberg in the 63 car. Katzberg is getting closer. Now, remember the last time we saw this car, it was towing along the 64 car. Well, 64 dipped into the pit lane. Tommy Milner is now on an outlap. And so does that mean, no, this Corvette is not going in this time either. So they are out of sync by at least a lap, or by at least 2 laps, in fact, from the sister car. And as the light grows around the circuit, morning is fully in effect. Somebody has turned the lights on in the studio as well.
As you were saying,
with tired eyes, what I really need is a Super Trooper burning my retinas right now.
This is for position as well on track. This is between Jan Opmeer and Guido van der Garde. So whilst we're being blinded, we'll try and
in a Manfred Mann style, being blinded by the light. So this is a battle for 5th position. Yeah, so Veloce Esport were on board with the number 24 car. This is Veloce Esports 1. They have 3 cars in the race, and in a very enterprising manner, they're called Esports 1, Esports 2, and Esports 3. But that's not necessarily in their number order of car, which is another thing. I thought, okay, guys, you know, you've got 3 numbers. Let's say number 24 is the lowest of them, or the highest of them. Don't call that car number 1. However, they have. So there you go.
Yeah.
There is the view back from the rear-facing camera of Guido van der Garde in the TDS machine. And with Opmeer in the slipstream behind him, van der Garde can do nothing really to stop the Veloce car hoovering itself up behind him and closing right in. You get so close, so close, so close on talent, and then aero helps you as well. Because we talked about this earlier, didn't we, Lewis, that there is a very significant turbulent air hole behind the LMP2 cars in R Factor 2, and that just helps you close in extra quickly on the car behind, but closing is one thing, getting by is another. He's being brave out of the kink, past where Peter Dunbrek aviated, down into Indianapolis, and he sweeps around the outside of the number 46 car, puts the move to bed, up to 5th position. And okay, you're not risking quite so much of a damaging accident in a sim as you would be in the real world, but it still is a precise move to carry it off at the speed they're carrying into Indianapolis. That is the outright fastest point of the circuit.
Well, it was well judged, because the thing is, going down there, go on the run down towards Indianapolis, you've got a couple of kinks, and the thing is when you're slipstreaming up to the back of them, if you're catching them right on the apex of one of those kinks, you can't actually you can't really do it. You've got to go to the outside, the inside. But where do you go? There's a car in your way, and it's going to go over to the racing line, which heads over to the left-hand side there anyway. So it was well timed. He almost like left it just a little bit late to get onto the throttle, because he just passed coming off from the first kink on there. That's where he got side by side. That's where he got alongside and then started making the move. For those of you sat at home, Jan Opmeer is a race winner in F1 esports and is 3 times Dutch karting champion. So has a little bit of real racing in his blood, does the 20-year-old. And now in sim racing, he's been for a little while. Doing very well here today as well, up to 5th position for Lotto Esports 1.
Passing compatriot Gerdo van der Gaard. Now I understand why Gerdo didn't fight that.
He's into the pit.
He's into the pits first, so that was the last lap of his stint. So no point in having a big battle when you're heading into the pits anyway. And letting Opmeer go cost him less time. And in the end, that is important. The position now doesn't matter. The position in 6 hours and 30 minutes does matter. So don't fight battles. Pick your battles, as my wife is very fond of telling me.
It's all about thinking big picture. Now the thing is big picture, that doesn't just apply to endurance racing, that applies to all forms of racing. I even do it in touring cars and stuff, and most touring car drivers do as well. I know you obviously see touring car drivers bashing each other off thinking, whoa, here I go. Sometimes it is, I have let someone go in a touring car because I knew they were going to take someone else out. So I was like, you look at it and you think, is this battle worth it? That's how you have to weigh it up. Can I gain something by letting this person go? So for Guido van der Gaard in this position, he's weighing up what he gains, what he loses. What does he gain from battling Jan Opmeer at the moment?
Nothing.
Nothing.
No.
Literally nothing.
It just costs him time. Just costs him time. And in the end...
It's not worth it.
Yeah, exactly. Slowing yourself down on track is not what motor racing is all about. So he lets Jan Opmeer go. Opmeer in 5th position. Up to 6 now has gone Yay, who is in the Rebellion Williams eSport car. Up to 7th place, Tristan Vautier for Panis Racing AAA. And down to 8th has gone Gerdo van der Gaard in that TDS E-Racing Motul car. 9th place is the Team WRT car. It really is getting very light in here now. Arne Schoenfleet.
Oh,
so
nice.
I'm doing my best.
That was very
I'm doing
good.
My best. I work with an awful lot of Dutch crews a lot of the time, and I haven't got a bad enough cold to pronounce Dutch names properly, but I'm trying. And in 10th place, apologies, Matt Richards has taken over from Jenson Button. So it's definitely the wee small hours, isn't it? It must be. No, it's not. It's still probably just coming up to midnight. Pacific time for Jenson Button. I think we're 8 hours ahead of the West Coast.
Is it 9 here? I think it's plus 8.
I think somebody said it was. I think it's 8 hours from GMT, so it's plus 9. So in fact, it's coming up to 11 o'clock his time in the evening, isn't it? But then he has been up since dark 100.
Yeah, I don't know if he's got any sleep through the middle part of the race.
Well, the problem is when you start, you know, in the wee small hours, you've woken up in an uncomfortable time for the human body. Anything before, well, midday, anything before about, you know, where you're waking up sort of 3 or 4 in the morning is not good for your circadian rhythms, no matter how much you practice it. And he will be a little bit sort of low on sleep anyway, because he's got a young son in the house, so there's that. And then you know, he's trying to go to sleep at like lunchtime or middle of the afternoon. I don't know. I'm not sure how much rest he will have had. I'm sure he will have tried to force himself to get some, Jensen, because he doesn't want to let himself down or the team down by just being so fatigued he can barely say his own name. So I'm sure he will have had as much as is humanly possible.
I know that team's done quite a good job to get up to this. I will note one thing from that team now. Matt did tell me to hang on to this info until the pit stop where Jensen got out of the car. But that there from Jensen Button is the last thing that he's doing in the race. Okay. It's the last thing that Al Bunkum's doing in the race. So now for the final 6.5 hours of the race, it is shared between Matt Richards and Jan van der Heijden. So I'm assuming it'll be a couple of stints from Matt Richards. Jan van der Heijden will come in and he'll set a few lap times, and then Matt Richards will come in. For those two, they've not been teamed up very much. They've done one race, realistically. They've been in the same team, but not in the same car. They did an LMP3 race. I did bring it up earlier. They finished third in that race, and that was their first one together. As we look at Matt Richards here in the Team Rocket Sancho. Yeah. That was close with the Rebellion.
Yeah, the Rebellion Williams car changing its line down the straight.
It's going to get boxed in here. Oh no, because they're quite far behind the... is that the other Rebellion Williams in front? That's the one that received the 60-second stop and go. The one that had...
may well be.
Who's behind that one now? It's Mroček who's behind that wheel at the moment of the 02 car. That's the one in the foreground of this. It's all much harder to follow now we're being blinded, but that's all part of the fun, I think. Yeah. Does this happen at actual? Because obviously we were having
at actual Le Mans, nobody cares what the commentators look like, and we're not on a shiny stage. We're in a little box with no air and no window. Well, we cover the window over because it's more helpful to be able to see. Well, it's more helpful to be able to see the race on the monitor than it is to see 10 metres of the Ford chicane, which is the view out of our window. Leader in the pits. So we start that cycle again with Nikodem Wisniewski in the pit lane after 279 laps by the leaders. So Rebellion Williams eSport Carnival 1, there he is. And my timing screen will tell me who else. That's Antonin Borka in the Cool Racing car. In fact, that's not. He has just left the pits. That's Pierre Rag in Cinetec Alpine car. Pierre Rag is in our studio and in the pits as well. So out goes the erstwhile race leader, and that now moves the number 13 car back into the lead. And is that the pattern then, do we wonder, for the remaining 6.5 hours, where these two cars are going to be swapping position by pit stop, and in which case somebody has already worked out who's going to be losing the lead at the wrong time as we run up to the checkered flag, and they will be back timing. How they do something about it. Leader then Mark Gastner. I'm sure you've talked about this before, that Gastner was a last-minute addition. Now, we talked about Michi Hoyer at IDEC Sport being a last-minute addition a week ago. Gastner was a last-minute addition, well, it's Sunday now, so 2 days ago, not 1 day ago as it was officially notified to us as being on the team. Was it Thursday or Friday? It was Friday.
Friday, yeah.
It was Friday.
Yeah, we were sat down having dinner, and we got that passed on to us.
And that's because Alex Arana was having so many connection problems continually through all the practice sessions and the test races leading up to the race, that eventually he just said, guys, or they made the executive decision between the two of, between Alex Arana and the team, it's not going to happen. This is going to be, you know, it's setting to sea with, you know, there's a potential weakness, a hole in the bottom of the hull. So Alex Arana, unfortunately, is with everybody else watching this go on without his participation. And that must be really galling, having gone right up to the race as part of the team and now having to sit and watch it.
That's not a nice experience. And to be fair, what a driver to replace him, Mark Gastner. This is not his favoured simulator, really. He's not really done too much on R-Factor. I did ask a couple of questions. I've commentated on him before over on Racestream. A former GT Academy winner He's also done some real-life racing in GT Masters and is the winner of the VW competition over on Raceroom, so has done quite a lot in sim racing, a little bit in the real world as well. But no matter that, to have jumped into this and gotten right up to speed is very impressive. He's not very far ahead at the moment of Nikodem Wisniewski, and I would say that even if you're taking this to and froing of pit stop sequence into account, the advantage is definitely swinging the way of the 0-1 car, Nikodem Wisniewski, behind that, because he's closing that gap, and eventually once he gets up to the back of Gastner, or even potentially over the next pit stop sequence, if he can gain 10 seconds over the next 10 laps, by the time they pit again, then Nikodem Wisniewski will hold the lead and Mark Gastner will be a long way back. But still, I would say second position for that team, considering that last-minute change, is very impressive.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. And 6 hours to go. If we were in Kota, it would be 24 minutes to the start of a World Endurance Championship race. So yeah, there's still a quarter of Le Mans yet to go. We have not got to that point yet. Frank from Bogota just highlighting the varying different fortunes of Juan Pablo Montoya and Tatiana Calderon, the two Colombian drivers for Richard Mille and also for Team Penske. And in the pit lane is
Wisniewski again.
Well, now has, again, we're not receiving notification from race control, but it may be that the game has, it is a drive-through, isn't it? The game has given him a drive-through, and that will be either for speeding in the pit lane, which is possible, or track limits, which is not possible because his stint has been too short and the count is reset per driver for every stint, as I understand it. So when you come into the pit lane, it resets your naughty boy count to 0. So that could be a speeding in the pit lane infringement. So as you were saying about if it all pans out the way it pans out, suddenly Gastner won't get back in the lead. That 48-second drive through the pit lane has not helped.
Very much thrown things away.
The number one.
So when it comes to track cuts, I don't know if we've changed it for this event. I can only base it off of my previous knowledge at R-Factor 2, so forgive me. And I'm sure there are a few people that are sat at home thinking the same sort of vein. Is that the way that the track cuts work is they're applied to the car. So let's say, for example, that we have that the penalty is applied on the 12th cut. So you have 11 track excursions that you're allowed to do, and they're all warnings. Say, for example, Kuba's in the car, Kuba Brzezinski, and he gets 7, and then hands it over to Nikodem, and then Nikodem gets 4. And then he hands it over to someone else. They're already on their 11 cuts.
Well, that's not a real world situation in World Endurance. Only the driver who...
Correct. Has done the cuts, has done the crime.
Unless there's a driver change, in which case the penalty is still applied to the car because the driver had earned it, and then the new driver has to come in and serve the drive-through. My understanding was, and I will go and double-check this in a couple of minutes, that in each stint you had 4 and then it was a penalty per driver, and that it reset for each stint with the driver. Otherwise it's like an endless count.
If that's the case, he might have got it before he came into
and again, that is entirely possible. The fact that it resets doesn't mean that there isn't a penalty. So the penalty may have been totted up, but as with the situation with Fernando Alonso, if he was awarded a drive-through by the game, he can push it on if he's coming in that lap to get his fuel. Now, because Alonso was in the pit lane, the game automatically applied the drive-through penalty to him, assumed that was him doing the drive-through and refused to let him fuel because you can't combine the two. Now, again, that's a software issue that R-Factor 2 are going to have to look at that's been highlighted by this race. The driver must have priority to be allowed to fuel. And then, no matter what the situation is, if he comes in, even mistakenly to serve a drive-through and he's on bingo fuel, which means he will not get round again, he must have absolute priority in the physics of the game to void, not to void that, but to put to one side that penalty for the moment, so he can at least get a partial tank of fuel in so he doesn't run out of fuel. And that is not at the moment possible within the game, and that's what caused Fernando Alonso and Rubens Barrichello's team to have to have the car run out of fuel because he was forced to leave the pit lane having not topped up with only 1.5 litres, and the cars need 7.5 litres to get around a lap at speed, which even if you're being really, really abstemious, is about 3 litres on tick over.
Yeah,
it's not
possible.
Much. No,
but
it's not much.
To be fair, he did well to get down towards to Mulsanne Corner.
Yeah.
What was I? Oh yeah. So I was having a conversation with Ben actually about this. Is a way of doing it where it would a nicer way of basically prioritizing your fuel in that example is by what if I'm not a game
Well, the
coder.
game knows how much fuel you've got left.
Even an even simpler way of even that, having 2 different having a penalty box.
No, because it still wouldn't void the penalty to allow you to fuel. Because if you've come in and served the penalty, you can't then go and fuel.
But if you've got your own box, so you've got your pit box, and you've got your penalty box,
no room
at the end of pit. I know it is.
There would have to be
tight.
one penalty box where, and actually in racing, if you're coming doing a stop-go at Le Mans, you will come into the penalty box and do it, and then be allowed to go, and the officials will time it for you. But that still doesn't overcome the problem that if the penalty is applied here, the game now takes over and says, you're doing a drive-through whether you want to or not. I've got no fuel, I don't care. And that's what they have to turn around. The game knows how much fuel is left in the car, except at the moment it's not prioritising the need for fuel over the requirement for a penalty to be served. So that needs to change in the software.
The Alonso one, what happened there? Because obviously, so in the pit lane, everyone is in control of the car, they're driving. The Alonso one, the issue with that was they had a 1-second stop and go. So the stop and go happens in his box. And so that, you're quite right, like the game prioritizes that immediately. And like once you're in the pit lane, it's, unless you're a proper sim racer who knows exactly what they're doing, it is almost impossible to change that and think clearly in that scenario. Because you'd normally think a driver would just be on the radio being like, no, I'm not serving that yet, I want fuel, thanks. We'll deal with that later.
The team would say, you've got 3 laps to do it, so you're going to get a full tank of fuel and you come back in at the beginning of the stint. Exactly right. But that's, again, it's either not possible in that situation, or it was not something they'd rehearsed and just they couldn't react in time. And then once that has happened, there is no way that race control can run round after you and fill the car up. So that was a very unfortunate situation. In our GTE field, Nick Tandy still leads. Everyone else is in the pits. 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 9th and 11th placed cars have all pitted and come back out together on the same fuel strategy. They're not actually on the same lap of the race, but they are running the same fuel strategy. Looking at a 56 car, Lawrence Hur for Team Project One. I beg your pardon, the 57 car. And that is Dylan Pereira for Team Project One. So Team Project One again, it's a German team, Team Project 1, and their cars have been very successful in one make racing, particularly in Porsche Super Cup and Carrera Cup Deutschland. They are the de facto benchmark, and the 57 car racing in World Endurance with Ben Keating from Texas as their gentleman driver in the GG AM series, and those are the colours that he had on his Ford GT team at Le Mans last year. And that's the Marla Corvette that's been off into Aston Martin that's been off into the gravel there, exiting Mulsanne Corner. And that's the car in which Robert Wickens was trying to drive. Rob's forced feedback steering wheel going on to maximum strength and making the car utterly undrivable. That's Ferdinand Habsburg. Ferdy, the charge of Jamie Campbell-Walter. Jamie with 2 hats on in this race, not only team manager of IDEC Sport, but also the personal manager for Ferdinand Habsburg. He's been coaching Ferdy for the last couple of seasons and bringing him on through the single-seater ranks. And Ferdy Habsburg, yes, that Habsburg family of Austrian Empire and Austro-Hungarian Empire dynasty fame, riding on board in the Marla Corvette as our Ferrari goes by. Would be nice to have roof numbers.
Would make life a
touch NASCAR
easier.
really would, and for the fans as well. When you're in a grandstand, it's much easier to see a big number on a roof than it is a small number on a door. And I'm definitely a big fan of NASCAR-style numbers. However, there you go. Yeah, exactly, as big as you can get. 57, yes, we're looking at Dylan Parra. Dylan Parra in 8th place. 9th place is Teo Porcher in the feed racing Corvette. And how far back is that? That's a little further back. Again, a good half a lap behind the Wins Porsche. Again, there's a very famous IMSA livery from the Camel GT era of the 1980s. That was the American IMSA Racing Series when Group C cars were at their peak. And Wins were a big title sponsor in those days. I can't remember exactly the driver lineups they had, but it's too early in the morning or too late in the day, or one of those, somewhere in between. I'm not going there because many more people with much better memories will remember that.
Like I said to Ben earlier, the moment that you get a fact wrong on here, you're instantly corrected, which is,
well,
you know, I
only if you look at Twitter.
like I've said, like, if drivers, teams and stuff have information, we're very open to having that info. Yep. We've received a lot of help from a lot of teams, throwing us some information, and really helping us out by passing on what they know, and making us sort of a bit more in the loop with the teams.
But that's, you know, and again, that's exactly the sim world and this sort of mix of sim and real replicated in the real world. The teams that are more forthcoming with information get talked about more, and the good PRs really understand that. And, you know, that's all part of why IDEC Sport welcomed all the broadcast team in, took us around on a garage view, let us talk to the drivers during one of their practice and test sessions, and have left their team Discord chat open to us so we can see what it is that they're doing, what changes they're making with the car through the race. And, you know, and that gives us a little window into not just what one team is doing, but a sort of a bigger overview of what all the teams, how they're working and the sort of thinking that they're doing. Maybe not in the exact detail, but the way that these teams are working with the cars. And for me, particularly, things that you don't think of, and I talked about this earlier with Michi Hoyer, finishing a test race and then going off to Indianapolis to do some wide open throttle running to work out what they could do about what they saw as a slight deficit in top speed and all those sorts of things. As a non-racer myself, it doesn't occur to me that, of course, all the possibilities in the sim world don't exist in my language. So all of those things, it's been a real education for me as much as for anybody else coming from our side of the fence, if you like. Not that there's a fence anymore. You know, those boundaries, I'm not sure what more than blurred is, but those boundaries were blurred a long while ago in the present unpleasantness and have become even more blurred.
It's very interesting. I spoke, so you say like you can go to different tracks and stuff like that. Sim racing is the only real place at the moment where you know how it takes decades to get the triple crown.
Yes.
And only one driver has done that ever, being Graham Hill.
Yeah.
A fair while ago. Of course, we've got 2 drivers out there at the moment that are close.
Yes.
But I did bring this point up. I was like, you know, in sim racing, you can do the triple crown in one weekend.
Yeah, I know, that's frightful, isn't it?
Which don't get me wrong, like, then you've also got to decide which ones actually count and stuff like that. It's never going to happen. At the same time, it's mad that you could do this race at Le Mans. And then on Saturday at like 8 o'clock, let's say someone's doing the Indy 500 for whatever reason on a Saturday, you can then do that race, come back, do your couple of stints in Le Mans, go to bed, wake up, finish Le Mans, then do a Monaco Grand Prix.
Well, the closest in the real world we get to that has really been in the USA, where on the same day in May, they run the Indy 500 and then NASCAR's Coca-Cola 600. And that has happened a number of times, and the barking mad have thought that that's a great idea, by which I mean obviously Tony Stewart. Smoke on a number of occasions has raced in the Indy 500 and then gone off to do the Coca-Cola 600. Now, if running the Indy 500 wasn't physically exhausting enough, going and turning left only for another 4 hours at the end of a brief helicopter flight. Yeah, is yeah, just the work of complete insanity. More recently, Rob Huff also raced in the Spa World Touring Car races and the Nürburgring 24 hours. And we have had, since World Touring Cars has been supporting the Nürburgring 24 hours, racers who have done 3 World Touring Car races and all the qualifying and practice for the N24 and then the N24. So that's
busy weekend.
That's a lot of laps of a not very convivial racetrack if the weather's not great. That's a lot of Nordschleife green hell for one weekend. And actually commentating is quite a challenge as well. But yeah, there is nowhere no way that you can do that. Back in the days of Mario Andretti and Jackie Stewart, they would frequently fly to Indy, do a test week, fly back for Monaco, fly back for Indy. And this is when you're on a super constellation, or maybe at best a VC10 or a 707, where an Atlantic crossing isn't the 5 hours or 8 hours it is now, it's a sort of 12 hours. So that was very hard work in terms of time zones, but from not every year, but from year to year, it could be done. But you're right, I mean, the Triple Crown, which is winning the 24 Hours of Le Mans, the Monaco Grand Prix and the Indy 500, should really be a quad crown of being Formula One World Champion. You could say it could be a quad crown by being IndyCar champion as well. But those are the 3 events that are this mythical Triple Crown. As you said, Juan Pablo Montoya and Fernando Alonso in this race alone are both on 2 of the 3 steps. Now, which is more likely in the short term? Fernando getting a car underneath him that will allow him to win the Indy 500, or Juan Pablo getting a winning car in Le Mans? My money would be on it being more likely that Fernando would be in a top flight car at Indy, particularly given that Penske at the moment don't race cars that could come and race, and that is Juan Pablo's team. But again, Mario Andretti went a lot of times in Indianapolis with a potential winning car, and famously had no luck whatsoever other than bad at Indianapolis. So he went many years without winning Indy. He went also many times to Le Mans and came away without winning it. But it is, you know, they're trying to replicate something that Graham Hill did in the 1960s. It's now the 2020. It's a long while that has been a sought-after target that's not been achieved by anybody.
It's quite a legacy, isn't it? By the way, I don't know if we can jump to it. P7 and P8 in GTE, I believe, according to my timesheets, they are separated by 0.4 of a second. Jordi Sveers, David Pereira, the 2 separated there.
Dylan Pereira has just pulled into the pit lane, so he was. Yeah, of course.
That's literally as I bring it up.
Yeah.
Do you think that's why he didn't? Because obviously at that time was coming down.
Yeah.
And Pereira didn't ever get up ahead of Jordi Sveers. So I wonder if he just was like, look, there's no point in me trying to, like we were saying earlier, there's no point in me trying to dive down the inside if I'm just coming in a few corners time.
No, I'll just use his slipstream to pull me a little bit, give me a quicker lap on the way in. Harry Tincknell has been in and out of the pits in the 97 Aston Martin. And the 51 Ferrari has been in and out as well, and that is Matteo Caruso, the sim racing driver who's at the wheel of that. What happened to the Wolverhampton Wanderers Gulf Racing Porsche? The 86 car was hovering around the top 10, 11, 12 when I left it safely in your hands, and it's now down in 17th place. What have you done with that while I was away?
I recall.
You don't know.
I remember one very specific image of it, which it was backwards in the Ford chicane. I cannot remember why.
Well, it was backwards in the Ford chicane. That will have cost it some time, and I'm assuming therefore some damage. This is Andrew Watson at the wheel of the car. He is one of the real-world drivers. He and the improbably correctly sized Ben Barker. Good morning, Miss Jax, if you're still awake in Adelaide. Ben Barker 6'6" of him. He is actually really only 5'4". He's just been stretched. He looks like I looked when I was 16, like a long string of linguini. But Ben Barker and Andrew Watson are the drivers on that car, and Adam Maguire and Eros Maschiluli. Apologies, Eros, for the Italian mangling. They are the sim racing drivers.
I've heard much worse on his name.
It's an unusual Italian name, Maschiluli.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what region of Italy that comes from, but that has the feeling to me that it might be either from the far north or the far south of the country. It doesn't seem an entirely Roman name, and again, I may be completely off kilter with that. But that car down in 17th in GTE, battling to stay about half a lap ahead of Laurence Hoare in the 56 Team Project One Art car. And would it really be a Le Mans race of any kind if there wasn't somebody with an art car livery? In this race, it's Team Project One, Project 1. And the final running car is the 52 AF Corsa Ferrari. So they have had a pretty tough time in that car. Charles Leclerc, Antonio Giovinazzi, Enzo Benito, and the man who's driving it at the moment, David Tonizza. And the Monegasque Italian lineup. They were very quick early on. They were the only Ferrari in the top 5, in the top 6, in fact, probably in the top 10 early in the race, and then struck a slew of problems. Looking at the battle here with real-world racer Ayanchan Juven, the Turkish driver. He's the only Turk in the field, I think,
believe so.
And he is now out of the pits. He's on his outlap, having taken over the lead car in GT, the 93 Porsche eSports team car. And Ayanchan Juven came onto my radar a couple of seasons ago in the Porsche Mobil 1 Super Cup, and last year a real tilt at the championship, which was won again by Michael Ammermuller. Ayanchan Juven quicker than all the Porsche Junior drivers, and had a really superb season. He could well be a very big endurance racing star, I think, Juven. He's young, he's very approachable, and he is a very quick peddler of 911s. How that translates into other cars, I don't know. I know a lot of drivers who've raced other things who get into 911s. Aren't entirely convinced that it's the right way of having a race car set up, but I think it's more to their liking these days. Fastest lap in the GTE class, still with that 93 car, not set by Juven, but set by Josh Rogers, the man who put it on pole in qualifying. And he is the reigning champion in the Porsche eSports Super Cup. Ooh, and that is the 99 Corvette losing its rear wing. So be cautious coming through the Porsche curves. So the feed racing car, who was at the wheel of that? I'm going the wrong way. Oh, it's still Théo Pourchaire, so that must be coming towards the end of a long stint for him. Because I've been in the studio over an hour and there hasn't been a different name in the car, so that's at least a double. So that'll be him possibly at the end of a triple stint, or maybe even a quad stint. I'm not sure at this time of day. You tend to be at the end of giving drivers a decent bit of a rest here, so we'll see how that works out for him.
Yeah, some drivers do longer stints at this point to give the other drivers a rest. At the start of the race, it's quite frantic. It'll be, oh, that's another one. Oh.
Well, no, that's the same one. Yeah, what did I say? When you lose the rear wing, be careful on the way back to the pits.
Going way, way too quick. That's what I meant by another one. He's off again.
Well, he won't have necessarily noticed that he'd lost the rear wing until he turned in there on the run down to Indianapolis. I think that was at the normal speed, and suddenly the world was gyrating around him.
That's a good question. I wonder, now this is a sim racer thing, so prepare yourself. I wonder if they're locked to cockpit cameras, because obviously from sim racing points of view, Some drivers tend to not drive from the cockpit. You can drive from the hood, the roof of the car or whatever. Obviously, a lot of people are like, no, don't do that. Drive from the cockpit, drive from the cockpit. However, if they aren't locked to cockpit, there is one very interesting thing that I know a lot of sim racers will do after a crash, is they will hit a button which brings in it's swing mode. It's like a chase cam or whatever it is in like Gran Turismo and stuff like that. So you can see your car. And then from that point of view, you can deduce whether how bad the damage is, whether it's worth pushing that hard. So obviously he has not done that. So he has no idea that he had no rear wing. But it is one of those advantages that we've got in sim racing, that provided we're not locked to cockpit, which is a setting that we can put on the server, you might just be able to find out these before you get to that point.
And you would sort of think that in a race this long and this intense, you would want to have that tool available to you so you can have a quick scan around the car. Of course, you know, when my son does it when he's sim racing, it just freaks my mind out. I can't take that in, but then I'm watching him watching, so that's a slightly different thing than if you're deliberately keying it in yourself.